In this video, I'm going to use what we've learned about making patterns out of paper to make something out of clay. This folded up box will be the body of the pot. This is earthenware clay, and I'll slice it up using my slab cutter. I work with the clay as soft as I can manage, and I'll begin to work with this clay as it is right out of the box. These slabs are really even in thickness and they can be used directly, but because of the size of this piece, I'm actually going to make the clay a little bit thinner. I work on a kind of denim table surface, so there's not a lot of texture from the canvas of the table. These are the thickness guides for my rolling pin. They're just strips of aluminum or rulers from the hardware store, and I just stack them up to make the thickness that I want. Remember to pick up the slab in between trips with the rolling pin. Once it hooks into the canvas, even though it's a very fine weave, it won't stretch anymore. I'll set this piece of clay aside to make parts for the pot other than the body itself. These are the tools I use: a wallpaper roller, a kitchen knife, an X-Acto knife and a square handle, and a piece of a serrated rib. I need a bigger piece of clay to make the body of this pot, so I'll join two pieces together with a scarf joint. That basically is just cutting the clay on an angle and overlapping the seam before rolling it out. I'll use my serrated rib to score this joint, but I won't add any slip because the clay is really soft. I'm slipping and scoring most of the seams that I make in this video, but when working with soft clay, you can skip some of that. I overlap the seam so it's a little thicker, and then when I roll it, the pressure from the rolling pin really joins the two parts together, so it's effectively just one piece of clay when I'm done. I can feel it when the rolling pin hits the thickness guides. You'll notice that I'm careful not to stretch the clay too much when I pick it up. This piece of clay should be big enough to get the pattern on, and I'll print it directly onto the piece of clay just by rubbing the pattern edges with my finger. The piece of paper is half the pattern, and rather than have two seams in the clay, I'll just print the pattern twice. Some of this video was really cut to make it shorter, but some parts like this I'm leaving in the time that it really takes, just so you can see that none of this is really difficult or time-consuming. I'll rough cut this so I can stand it up like a cylinder, but you'll see me cut the edges that join together on an angle again. And I just do all of this freehand because it's close enough. Watching this, I realized that I grab my kitchen paring knife a lot, and I think the reason why is that I sharpened the back side of the knife as well, so it'll cut whichever direction I pick it up from. I will slip and score this seam because it's pretty important that it stays together. You can see how soft this clay is, so I have to be gentle here. You'll see that I first get the thing into a cylinder shape before I cut the darts from the pattern. This makes this whole process manageable. If you cut those V shapes out ahead of time, there's no way to get it to stand up like this. You can use your fingers or the little rolling pin or a rib to make sure the seam stays together, but you'll probably notice that I don't try and make the seam invisible. I like for people to be able to figure out how I made something. I'm going to finish the bottom of this first, so I'll grab my turntable to make this easier to work on. This piece of wood has got a curved face, and I'll use that as a backup to the roller. Next, I'll cut the darts out, and you'll see that I hold the knife at an angle, and that I actually vary the angle of the knife through the cut. And this is a good time to point out why I use a knife with a square handle. It makes it really easy to register the angle of the knife in my fingers. I think the over-the-shoulder view here from the camera is best, but I can't see the screen on the camera and there's no one to focus it for me. So you have to pardon when things aren't clearly visible. What I'll do here is kind of rough fold it or begin the fold and then go back and actually make the seams connect. Once things are together, it's possible to go back and kind of poke and prod at things and change the shape a little bit by stretching the clay. This form could have a square bottom quite easily, but I'm going to go with the pattern here and make the bottom round. I'm cutting with the knife roughly at a 45-degree angle, and when I cut out the circle for the bottom, I'll match that angle. There's more than one way to get the shape of the bottom, and I'll show you a couple. You could measure it, but I'm just going to eyeball it with a compass here. And you can also just print the shape. I could just print this right onto a piece of clay and then cut it out. This works well if it's not a regular shape like a circle. Whenever I cut circles, I use the turntable. It just speeds things up. And you can also see why the square handle of the knife is really handy here. I'm going to finish the bottom of this pot and let the bottom half of it stiffen before I flip it over and work on the top. It's not necessary to do the whole thing all in one go. Oftentimes when I make a bottom in the pieces upside down, I'll use a bat or a piece of wood to make sure that the bottom is relatively flat. If you put a lamp with an incandescent bulb over the form, it'll speed the drying some. This lamp is actually an LED light, so it won't do anything. Here's how I'll wrap it up and let it dry for an hour or so. And this is the end of part 1.